right, what's up, everybody? This is Cody, aka DFS Prodigy, coming to you live with special guest sparring with reality betting. So he is familiar in Twitter. You obviously seen him all over the place. He's a huge UFC guy in the Twitter sphere. So I'm excited to bring him on and talk about UFC for this card and just betting wise, so on and so forth. So how's it going, my man?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me on. First time guest. Looking forward to it, Cody.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, man. I'm excited about going over the card. Like we talked about a little bit beforehand, we already have one fight off. So that's typically how it goes in the COVID times with UFC is there's always going to be a fight off or even three. So it's hard to have a full card going into a weekend. So like I said, we're just going to kind of go over the betting numbers. I have all the betting numbers pulled up. We're going to go over subs, knockouts, stuff like that, over and under rounds, what we think is the best odds, and kind of go from there. So starting with the main event, we have Robert Whittaker versus Kevin Gastelum. Talk to me about this fight, man.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Honestly, I think it's one where Calvin is getting just a tad disrespected, like not enough for me to jump in personally, because I do think Whitaker is going to be the superior minute winner. He just has kind of a funky style to fight. He kind of tends to fight from the outside, a lot of footwork, a lot of lateral movement, kind of darting in and out of the pocket. With that, I think it's going to be difficult for Calvin to track him down, at least with consistency. It is a 5-round fight as well. That needs to be noted. We have seen, Rob dinged on a few occasions, but like often we hear that Rob has like this, poor chin. I don't necessarily buy it per se, because that was also a narrative that was taken into his last fight with Cannonier. I was on Rob at evens in there personally at plus 100, cash a nice little 2-unit play there. Really, if you look in the aggregate, he's largely been pretty durable. Yeah, has he been dinged on a few occasions, but really over his 20 fight UFC run or whatever it is now, he's largely proven to be pretty durable. And so the big difference for me, outside of just the general stylistics, because Calvin is a southpaw, does have a nice left hand. Rob needs to be wary of that when he enters the pocket. But in general, I do think he possesses the higher output and the better minute winning ability. I personally don't think he finishes Calvin. And with that, I don't necessarily love minus 260. I personally wouldn't lay it. Like I said, even at current price, I'd be more intrigued with actually betting Gastelum, despite my opinion, just based on the line discrepancy. I put Rob minus 200 personally. But I think it's actually a better fight to target props for Rob by decision or 4-5 decision. I think is probably the way to play it.
That's where I was thinking too, because that's a huge number for Whittaker, is that negative 260, negative 265. That number is highly juiced in my opinion. That's where I wouldn't have touched it, honestly. Now, like you were saying, I would not mind taking a shot on Kelvin, but the thing is, it's the quality of fighters that he's fought. He's fought guys on the way out of UFC, which is also kind of interesting. And when Whittaker fought Cannonier, that was a different Cannonier in that fight. And like you said, durability wise, Whittaker has fought through hell and back in the UFC. So we've seen him deemed up and he still made his bounce back here and there. Bloody, always hit, always hurt, seems like. And now he's still durable, in my opinion, like you were saying. So this is going to be a striking battle, in my opinion. Remember, it is a 5-round fight. So I like the over, and I think it's going to go to distance. I think it's going to be Whittaker by decision, in my opinion. That's why I'm looking at this fight. I don't see either guy getting a submission or a knockout, because both guys are durable, like we were saying. I mean, this is a great fight to me in the main event. I think this is a fight that's been in the making. So I wouldn't mind taking a shot on Whittaker for decision and in the over on distance in the rounds. Do you like the over in this fight or the under?
Probably the over if you are to play it. I guess I don't know where that's currently at. I guess for me, just based on how I capped the fight, instead of actually playing the over, I'd rather just play a side, because I think Rob around decision or that 4-5 decision is closer to evens. Because I think he's the superior minute winner, I think you're better off actually just taking Rob rather than the over, personally. But that's just my take.
Right. So I think we both agree, though, that I think Whittaker by decision is the main thing. And if you want to do a dogger pass in this fight, it'll be Kelvin at that plus 220 or plus 210. That's a high number for him that I definitely wouldn't mind taking a shot on if you think the underdog can win this fight. But going down to the co-main event in Stevens and Dr. Close, what do you think of this co-main?
Yeah, so I like Stevens a little bit, and traditionally it's interesting because I haven't been a guy who's put my money on Jeremy Stevens very often, just because I think at this point in his career, the blueprint out there is to beat him. But ironically, I actually think it's a decent spot for him. I don't love him personally. Um, just in general, not saying like, 3, 4, 5 unit play on him or anything like that, but I do think he's worth a small stab. And that's largely because if you look at the guys who are beating Stevens, I know he's coming off, I think of, a 4-fight skid here, but Stevens has been fighting, perennially top 15, top 10 guys,
Exactly.
for years now. And really the common theme in the guys that are consistently beating him are your longer, taller, range strikers, guys who utilize a lot of lateral movement, um, who are going to fight what I would call quote unquote Jeremy Stevens smart.
Yeah.
Drakkar Klose is not exactly that type of guy.
Uh,
He's another guy who likes to play the bull. He likes to play the aggressor. And despite, his solid record in the UFC and, winning a lot of these fights, a lot of his fights are very, very close, to be completely honest. And I guess where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion on this, is can Drakkar Klose go out there and bowl around a guy like Jeremy Stevens? I tend to say no. Not really many guys have been able to do that to a guy like Jeremy Stevens. Like even in Stevens's last fight against Calvin Kattar, Jeremy Stevens went there and took the first round off Calvin Kattar. A lot
exactly.
of people forget about that.
And look where Cater's now.
He
So
got, yeah, before he smoked him. So ultimately, my reasoning why I think Stevens has some value in this spot is that Close is going to give the type of fight that traditionally Jeremy Stevens needs to succeed. I do think it's a step up for Close as well. So to grab that guy around evens, I think is value. I think it's also important to note Stevens traditionally has fought down at 145, started his career at 155, dropped down to 145. He's going back up to 155 for this fight. But conversely, Drakkar Klose has actually talked about going back down to
yeah.
145. I should say not going back down, but going down to 145 for the first time in his career post this fight. So with that, Stevens isn't undersized here in any capacity, even going up to 155 either. So I think that's an interesting consideration. So ultimately, I guess could Close, maybe squeak something based on volume? Sure, I wouldn't be shocked. But getting a guy like Jeremy Stevens, more battle tested vet, who I think has the tools, and Close giving him the type of fight that he needs to succeed in, I think Stevens is a good look around evens.
That's where I'm looking at too. It's the veteran experience, in my opinion. That's what's making me over the edge with him. Is that just that vet experience that he brings into the ring, and that he's fought caliber guys like you say, Calvin Kattar. He looked good in that fight, and it is Jeremy Stevens. He's fought legendary guys compared to Close, who he just doesn't put the fights over the edge, in my opinion. Like he wants to, he looks good in the ring, but he doesn't have the mentality to push him over the edge. That's where I'm looking at, like Stevens has, like what you said, the bull mentality. He can definitely get in the ring and control the ring time. That's what's also valuable. If you're going to look at DraftKings, he has that ring time in his hand. So I'm all over Stevens in this fight. If he connects with one hit for Close, I like the knockout here. I mean, we've seen the power in his Stevens' hands that definitely is clicking. I mean, I was at the gym, like I was saying, I watched the highlights of Jeremy Stevens not too long ago, and like literally, it's the power he carries in his hands is unbelievable. So I'm all over Stevens in this fight. I think he can overcome Close, and that's where I'm looking at. Is I like the odds on Stevens by far, and I like the vet experience that he carries in this ring. So that's what I'm mainly looking at. Going down to the Arlovsky and Chase Sherman fight. This is an interesting fight that I wanted to get your opinion on. How do you feel about this fight?
Honestly, I think Arlovsky's getting a little disrespected here. Based on the odds, I think it's been a little bit of one-way traffic on Chase Sherman. And I get it to some extent that, Arlovsky, hasn't been, this world beater necessarily in the back half of his career. But what I will say is that Arlovsky is an uber battle tested guy that I think people have been writing off for many years. And because of that, he's actually came through in some pretty big dog spots. At the same time, I believe he's 3-3 in his last 6. Is he necessarily winning these, pretty dominant based fights, just starching guys? No, but that's honestly one of the credences I give to Arlovsky in recent years is if you really watch the trajectory, is that he's adapted his style to fight more so based on his age. He understands the fact that he can't sit here and get into necessarily these big wars that he may be used to with guys. The durability might not necessarily be there as much as it was before because he hit that big stint where he started getting knocked out.
Exactly.
Everybody said he was going to be done. And then, kind of in the last, 3 or so years, I would say he's turned a bit of a corner, at least not from an overt perspective. Like I said, not saying the guy's like, 6-0 in his last six or anything like that, but he seems to understand where he's at, and he's a battle tested dude. So when it comes to Sherman, I believe went 2-3 in the UFC in his first stint. He's back. He went 3-0 on the regionals against guys who probably wouldn't even sniff a Bellator heavyweight card.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest,
Yeah.
goes out there, beats Ike Villanueva. Yeah. Impressive performance. But Ike Villanueva is also, in my opinion, a middleweight. I don't really know why he's even fighting at heavyweight, to be completely honest. So it's like,
Exactly.
yeah, Chase Sherman looked like a world beater in that fight. And so what people look at, I'm assuming at least, in why the line's closing as much as it is, Arlovsky's been in close fights. Chase Sherman lands nearly double the output statistically as Arlovsky. But what a lot of people fail to understand is that a guy in Andrei Arlovsky suppresses volume better than almost anybody at heavyweight. I mean, the last two guys that were able to land significantly on him were Tanner Bozer, I think, who landed 68 significant strikes on him. Arlovsky still won that fight. 2/3 of those fights were leg kicks. Just shows judges don't score leg kicks historically. The other guy, Ben Rothwell, landed about 70 on him. Arlovsky doubled him up on strikes, landed like 152, won that fight. The last guy to land any more than either of those two guys in the last 12 years was Tim Sylvia back in 2008 for the title over the course of a 5-round fight. So ultimately, my debunking theory on this Chase Sherman is going to come out here and value him narrative is prove it to me. Prove it to me, because over the last 12 years, that has not been something that's easy to do on Andrei Arlovsky, let alone Andrei Arlovsky has been fighting elite level competition. Chase Sherman is probably his biggest step down since Junior Albanian, like back in 2017. So like you can say, okay, Arlovsky's 41, 42, whatever. I get it. It's like, but go look at his recent run, guys. Like, he has not been looking bad. He's a guy who's consistently undervalued in spots. And to be honest, I think he's getting consistently I think he's getting undervalued here again in the spot. I don't agree with the Chase Sherman line movement. I think a right around the open was actually correct. So I agree with the odds makers. I'm not saying load up on Arlovsky just because of the nature that he's fought in close fights, but I do think it is a bit of a levels fight that Arlovsky wins a striking based decision.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too. Is the public is looking at Chase Sherman just because of the 4-5 win streak? They see that he's the younger guy. They see that he has the more higher volume. But the thing is, look at who Arlovsky has fought. I mean, the guys that he's fought is high caliber guys, similar to Stevens. He's a legend in the making, in my opinion. Many guys might say, oh, he's just a pushover. He's 40 years old. That doesn't really matter. It does matter because he's still consistent as can be. He can still hang with the top level guys here in the UFC. I mean, he's still making a name for himself. And look, he's literally the third fight on the card. So, I mean, he's still making a name for himself. He's still stepping up. This is a good fight for Chase Sherman to make his name. And like you said, prove it to me. Prove why you belong in the UFC, to belong to fight a guy like Arlovsky in this fight. So, in my opinion, I think it's the craft and experience in the ring for Arlovsky. That's what I'm looking at. I like the negative 115 that you can find on him. You can find good numbers on him here and there. So I want to see more of Chase Sherman. That's the thing. I want to see him prove it to me in this fight and prove why he can face top level talent. Because we've seen it time and time again, these legends just knock out these younger guys. We've seen it on the past cards. I mean, we've seen fight and fight again with the legends still in the making, proving why they still belong in the UFC. So, in my opinion, this is a close fight, but I want to see Sherman fighting this. I don't mind the dog money if you want to take a stab on Sherman. I know people are going to want to because it's plus money, but I'd rather get the 115 on Arlovsky in this fight. And I think he still makes a name for himself. I still think he belongs in the UFC. So, like you said, I think we're both agreed that I'm all in on the money line for him. So, going down to Malkoun versus Al Hassan. So, obviously, Malkoun's on the card because of Whittaker. So, talk to me about this fight, man.
Yeah, not really too much to unpack here. I guess my credo, if I was to say anything for the fight, Al Hassan probably KOs him, but the problem I have, and I think it's a consistent theme that people tend to do, is they'll run down the rap sheet. The guy KOs a ton of people. Malkoun just KO'd in his last fight. Al Hassan's going to KO him. Once again, I think that's the most likely outcome. But the problem with Al Hassan consistently is the fact that he is a one-round fighter. You run down his rap sheet, he's a guy who's starching guys in the first round. So when people talk about, should I parlay this guy, Luke? I'm never ever going to parlay round one win condition based fighters, because you always have to ask yourself, well, what in the consideration
Yeah.
if he does not finish this guy? What happens? And
Yeah.
what have we seen from Al Hassan when fights have been extended? He's losing fights on the cards. So, with that being said, I would not recommend Al Hassan as a parlay piece, despite me thinking he does kill him early.
Yeah.
But if you are to play him, I think you're better off to go the prop route. Personally, Malkoun would be a gigantic flyer, because the guy's still only 4-1 in pro MMA. Not a ton of tape on him. His W's have came over super low level oceanic regional guys. So honestly, I don't really know what to make of the guy. I don't think he's anything special, but we have seen Al Hassan slow down in extended fights. And if Malkoun survives, would I be shocked if this fight played closer than odds indicate? Not really, to be completely honest, but I guess I'm more on the sides that Al Hassan probably knocks him out.
That's where I'm looking at too. Is like the only reason why Malkoun is on this card because of Whittaker, obviously, because we've seen that time and time again. Because he's the grappling coach of Whittaker, so obviously that's why he's on the card. He's not a striker, and he's not looked good in the UFC bouts that he has fought in. I mean, like you said, he's got knocked out time and time again. Al Hassan, though, he's a first round knockout or bust, in my opinion. If you're not going to get the knockout in the first round, his cardio's down the drain. You might as well cross him off the card and just move on and chalk it up as a loss if he just makes it. If Hassan goes to the second or third round, because he just cannot make it past the first. That's what we've seen time and time again. So, in my opinion, I'm obviously going to take the under in the rounds here. That's where I'm looking at. Malkoun, if you want to take a stab at him at plus money, if you think this goes to the second or third round and he can overcome the cardio of Hassan, that's where I'm looking at, because like we said, the gas tank is so scary to me for Al Hassan. So it's pretty much Al Hassan knockout first round or bust, in my opinion. That's where I'm looking at. There's not much to say more about this fight. It's a knockout or bust, pretty much, plain and simple. So moving on to a better fight, in my opinion, Munoz and Pena. What do you think of this fight, man?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more bullish on Pena in this spot than maybe some most. And it's ironic because I haven't been exactly the biggest Pena supporter historically, because I do think there is obviously some issues with his game. He's not overtly high output. He can be taken down. He's just kind of a crafty and tricky guy to fight. Obviously the last performance against Worthy wasn't particularly, encouraging, getting submitted by him, who's, not a strong submission grappler. Alex Munoz, D1 wrestler out of Oklahoma State. I think people might put two and two together, say, Pena stuffs takedowns at 52%, fighting a strong wrestler. Munoz going to come out and grind him. But I'm honestly not really convinced about that, to be honest. Well, one, Munoz isn't some guy who's necessarily like aggressively attempting the takedowns, even in his regional tape. And then two, even against, Hack Press, obviously Hack Press is a pretty solid fighter, but he did go 0 for 7, I believe, I believe 0 for 8 on takedowns in that fight as well, and got beat to an absolute pulp. So despite the takedown defense numbers of Pena, he's never a guy who's controlled extensively on the ground. He does a good job of threatening subs to either, deter the takedown in and of itself, or look to sweep, or he's threatening from his back. So he's not actually really hanging out there too long in the aggregate. And we haven't really seen Munoz tested in that capacity at all from a solid submission grappler. I know Pena, doesn't have any, sub wins in the UFC. I believe he did sub the guy in the Contender Series in his, I guess, quote unquote debut. But he is a funky long guy for the division. He actually attempted a buggy choke against Frivola, which is a super unorthodox choke that you don't see very often and is very difficult to hit. And it was kind of close. He ended up losing it, but still, I think that shows that, despite the fact that, he's on paper, not this high level grappler, he is kind of a crafty, funky guy to fight. So I guess my angle is more so, I don't think that Munoz is going to come out here and wrestle him to death for 15 minutes. I also do believe that Pena is the better striker. and he'll be able to get into a rhythm on Munoz and be able to threaten from his back. And we even saw against, I believe his fight was, I'm sorry, what's with the guy's name on the Contender Series? I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, I can't remember. I
Uh,
remember who you're talking about, but I just can't think of it.
Nick
Nick Newell,
Newell.
right?
Yeah, the guy with one arm, and that's
With
not
one
shitting
arm.
on the guy at all. But
Yeah.
when he took him down, there was a lot of times when Newell was threatening things, and Munoz really didn't have anything to do on the ground. So once again, not trying to be a dick, but if you're
Never.
scared of the ground bang of a guy with one arm against a crafty guy in Pena, I
Yeah.
guess it's a little disconcerting there. So I jumped in on Pena at a little bit of a better price. I got him at minus 130 personally. I figured this line was going to jump a bit. I think it's a good spot for Pena to show out, finally put the tools together. Not a heavy play. Like I said, there's still, some concerns with him on paper. I guess it could be a winnable fight for Munoz, but I'm more so the opinion that Pena shows out here.
That's where I'm thinking too. Is I want to see Munoz take more of those takedowns. He needs to shoot for him way more and to be more aggressive. That's where he needs to go. Is he needs to be locked in if he wants to win this fight against Pena. It's like you said, Pena can grapple with him. I know the takedown defense is scary for Pena, so a lot of people are going to say, well, like you said, 52%, it's not great. It doesn't look good. But then again, Munoz is not taking those shots like he needs to be. So it's that ring IQ that I want to see more of Munoz take advantage of. Because if he goes into this fight, goes in and shoots for the takedowns nonstop and wrestles with Pena, I think he can overcome Pena. In my opinion, I think he really can. But like I said, like at the same time, when I think Pena is crafty, I think he's way more experienced on the grappling format. I think that's where he takes advantage of Munoz. And you can get him at a number where negative 150, where I wish you could have got him earlier. But then again, I think you can definitely get him at decision here. And that's where I'm kind of looking at is Pena for the win in this fight. And I don't think Munoz is ready for this fight, to say the least. So, but like you said, it's going to be a good fight, I think, from the ground. So I'll be excited to see this fight from a grappling standpoint. I really can't wait to see this fight. So, but going down to, I guess we're skipping over Bill and Ramos because that fight's off now. Unfortunately, that was really a fight I was looking forward to. So that was one of the top fights on this card, I think. So, but moving down to now, Tracy Cortez and Justin Quiche. What do you think of this fight, man?
Yeah, originally I thought I actually might be taking the dog shot on Kish just because I give her a bit more credit than a lot of people do. Really running through a rap sheet, she's been competitive against a lot of tough girls, but really the difference here is the fact that Tracy Cortez is the best wrestler that she's fought.
Yeah.
And I'm not the biggest Cortez fan in general, but I do think she's a younger developing fighter who is a girl who historically will go to her base. And I think that's what she'll do here because honestly, I actually think the fight is pretty competitive standing, if not actually favors Kish. But the fact of the matter is if Cortez once again takes her base, best wrestler she's fought, I don't think she'll have a problem getting Kish down and controlling her for extensive minutes. The main fight to hit on for Kish was her fight with Felice Herrig. Granted, it was about 3.5 years ago, but she did get controlled extensively for, a little over 8 minutes in that fight. And, Herrig, her wrestling is a tad underrated in my opinion, but she's not a wrestling based fighter. She's actually a kickboxer traditionally. And she had a ton of extended grappling success on her. So that's really the main point and the consideration for Cortez here. Like I said, as long as I think she takes her most likely path to victory, she should be able to grind her way to a decision. So honestly, I don't know if I would touch her in terms of a parlay piece or lay the money line at current price because it's gotten bet up. Where if you were able to get her, closer around minus 250, minus 240, minus 230, I'd say it, but I'd say the line and the market has roughly adjusted to where it should be, in my opinion. But I do think the value play of this fight is actually Cortez by decision, right around 55%. I think it's the most likely outcome of the fight. Kish has proven very difficult to finish historically. I know she got finished in her last outing, But fun fact, she was a plus 240 against Sabina Mazo, which I was on. She was up on two judges' scorecards against Sabina Mazo, gets head kicked, and then submitted in the third round. So assuming Justine Kish didn't get finished in that fight, she actually beat Sabina Mazo right there.
Right.
So it's just a situation where she just got caught and finished in the fight. But in the aggregate, historically, she's proven to be very durable and defensively responsible on the ground to not get submitted. I don't overtly value the submission acumen of Tracy Cortez, so I largely just see it being a grinding, wrestling-based decision. So I really think it's probably, in my opinion, the play of the card. It's Tracy Cortez by decision right around evens. I think it possesses a lot of value.
That's exactly what I have in my notes also is about this fight is I have her by decision. That's where I'm looking at because this money line is juiced. I'm all in on Tracy Cortez, like you were saying. I mean, Kish is the veteran, but then again, Cortez is a young fighter that's on the rise in the UFC, in my opinion. She has huge potential to be that face of the UFC, in my opinion. I think that's where they're really trying to push her up. And like I think she's worked on the grappling a ton. That's where her main focus has been is that grappling. And it's looked better and better as time goes on. And I don't think Kish's wrestling compares to Cortez is where it's at now. Is that grappling? And like I said, she's worked on it a ton. That's where I'm mainly looking at it. The potential, the young in her prime, that's where I'm looking at. They're trying to build her up. I'm all in on Cortez by decision. I think this is the fight that's definitely in her favor. I'm not taking negative 300 or 305. That's way too juiced in my opinion because I mean, it happens. We've seen flops happen all the time, and especially in female fights, like you were saying. I mean, time and time again, we've seen the flops here and there. But then again, I'd rather go just Tracy Cortez by decision. That's where I'm looking at in this fight, and I'm just playing it and moving on. So now to the heavyweights in Espinito versus Romanov. What do you think of the big boys in this fight?
Yeah, really interesting fight. Probably the one
Yep.
on the card that I actually have the most intrigue in because it seems to be a very polarizing type of
Yep.
fight in a lot of ways. I think the general MMA community has been extremely high on Alexander Romanov. And I'm, I guess, in the slight minority that I still have a lot of questions on him historically. And I do think Espino is a guy who has the skill set and tools to potentially expose that. And really, the interesting dynamic of the fight is if you watch both guys historically, they just have not faced much resistance at all. They've been able to impose their will on pretty much anybody they've fought. Largely via wrestling and grappling. But what I will say for Espino is the guy is extremely experienced, extremely credentialed, maybe not so much so in MMA, I guess, if you're trying to make the comparison to Romanov in terms of number of fights. But the thing with Espino is the guy's been around for a long time and just fighting in the martial arts in general and just wrestling and grappling for a long time. He's fought in freestyle wrestling. He's fought in combat sambo. He's fought in this ironic, weird belt wrestling. He's
I was
fought
say it
over in
was yeah,
Africa and
something
in
like that.
Senegalese wrestling, and was undefeated over there. I think he was 17-0, just fighting, or not fighting, but wrestling just these gigantic human beings over there as well. So it's like, despite Espino, being a little bit more inexperienced in terms of quote unquote MMA, the guy has been around the block for a while. He's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu, has won world championships in that. It's been a black belt, I believe, for over a decade now. And so that's kind of where the rubber meets the road for the fight for me. I don't necessarily think that Romanov is going to be able to sit there and just toss a guy around like Juan Espino. Not to mention the fact that Espino has significant finishing upside in this fight as well on the ground, because we haven't seen, outside of maybe one fight from Romanov a couple of years back where he got put on his back, wasn't there for very long, but still got put there. In the aggregate, haven't seen a ton of it. But what I will say, if you are to bet this fight, there is some conjecture, there is some assumption going into it. But I guess my overall take is that I don't really understand why Espino is a dog in the spot, because I do think he has a style to expose some of the greenness and some of the holes in Romanov's game. And I do believe he does have the higher finishing upside in the fight as well. So I have a little sprinkle on Espino sub at plus 330. I haven't played his money line at all yet, but I most likely will because I do think he should have a minus next to his name. Once again, like I said, there's some conjecture in the fight, not an overtly bullish take. If I do play the money line, it's probably going to be small, but Honestly, man, Alexander Romanov just hasn't really proved a whole lot to me. He just really hasn't beaten anybody. You can say, I guess, hypothetically, the same thing about Espino, but to me, it just comes down to credentials and skill sets. And I think Espino has the tools to beat a guy in Romanov.
See, that's what I was pulling up. Also, is like if we're like that was a good point with who look who Romanov has fought. It's literally Lima and Roca Martinez. It's not guys who are big names. Like Espino has fought in the UFC for a long, long time, and we've seen him time and time again come out and look good. So the thing is, it's just who do you think has a more knockout potential, and who do you think can grapple the most? So, in my opinion, I think if this comes to a grappling standpoint, it's going to be Espino's fight to win. I think, like you said, that he's been working on the wrestling time and time again. It may not look like he is in the UFC, quote quotation marks, but he's still wrestling. He's still picking up his game where it's not like he's just laid off and just hasn't done anything. You know what I mean? That's what the public's thinking. It's just they're thinking that Espinosa has been doing absolutely nothing years and years, and now just coming into fight. So I think they're trying to push him over. But in my opinion, I like Espino here plus money. This is a dog or pass fight, in my opinion. Romanov, I want to see more out of him. I want to see more submissions. I want to see more grappling. I want to see more look who he's fought, that kind of thing. In my opinion, too, like Romanov. So public money is going to be on Romanov just because he is the recently biased fighter. They seen him recently look good. But I don't think the public's ready for Espino. I don't think they're ready for I don't think they're ready to see him fight again. So I'm excited about this fight. I think this is a great fight, in my opinion. I can't wait to see it. So give me Espino plus money. You know what I mean? Because in my opinion, this comes down to grappling. I'll give it to Espino. What about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I will say is I wouldn't say shocked, but I'd be surprised if a guy in Romanov can sit there and toss around
That's what I'm saying.
Espino.
Yeah.
Like I said, the guy's exponentially more credentialed. I
Yeah.
mean, looking at the two, Romanov is the bigger guy. Espino's probably I would say a more of a slimmer heavyweight's probably not the way to describe it, but he's, in my opinion, he's actually the guy who's in the better shape. And like I said, he's just been grappling at a higher level for much longer. And I think it was on our podcast this past week on Wednesday, the Club at Sub podcast, cheap plug, check it out on YouTube.
Gotta throw that out there.
Our
right?
boy John was talking about it. Yeah, our boy John was talking about it, that when it comes to grappling, like there usually isn't too much, especially at heavyweight, like there isn't too much, like, I don't know what the best way to describe it is, like rubber meets the road. Like it's very, very binary. Either a guy can go out there and do it or he can't. And so that's why I think we're just going to learn a lot here. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, tosses him around, Espino death gases or something like that. Romanov knocks him out, pounds him on the ground. Who knows? It's heavyweight. But I think there's more out there to suggest. Yeah, there's more out there to suggest for me that Espino should be favored and is 100% value at a plus number.
Exactly. So going on to the female fight, Pena versus Gonzalez, what do you think of this fight, man?
I'm like a Lupita Godinez truther. I've been watching her for a second. She's only 5-0, and it's interesting because we have seen these spots before where we see the younger, WMMA girl come in, fight a more battle-tested vet. She's juiced. It falls on its face. I 100% concede that. We've seen it time and time and again. But I don't think this is the spot. Personally, I think this Godinez girl is the real deal. She's very well-rounded. She's one of the few girls currently in WMMA that actually comes from a traditional wrestling background, like a Tracy Cortez. She is a purple belt in jiu-jitsu under the 10th Planet system, and the girl can box her absolute ass off. Like, but a lot of people completely concede, the wrestling grappling consideration because we haven't seen her, overtly go to it a ton in her past fights. Why is that? Because she's going out there and outboxing girls. She hasn't even needed to use what the base of her actual game is. And so that tells me not only a lot in terms of just her general confidence in her stand-up, but where her acumen is at. Grant, I concede the fact that she has not been fighting the greatest girls out there, but her last win in LFA over Demopoulos, I think, is a good W, who is a 10th Planet black belt, might I add. And she went out there and won the first 3 rounds. It was a 5-round fight. It did get a little hairy, a little bloody. back and forth down the way. But at the end of the day, this one coming up with Panay is a 3-round fight. She went out there and, beat a tough girl, and Demopoulos took the first 3 rounds off of her. And I think she can pretty much do the same thing here with Panay. Panay is a black belt. She is, a vet. She's one of those girls that has been fighting before, WMMA was really even a thing. And so, her record's not bad in that capacity. Her losses aren't bad. Michelle Watterson, Ioana and Jacek, Jessica Andrade. So I think that's also a part of the angle that people have taken here and why we've seen some more Panay steam come in a little bit. And to some extent, I agree, because I talked about it right off the top. We have seen these younger WMMA girls be overly valued, but I don't think it's the spot. Panay is also coming off a 4-year layoff. She's 38 years old now. Even in her fight, or her last UFC fight, she lost to Danielle Taylor, a girl that went 2-3 in the UFC, who's no longer in the UFC, who I might add is also 5 feet tall. And people talk about, the size discrepancy between Godinez and Panay. It's like, well, she did just get in 4 years ago, went out there and got outboxed by a girl who's not UFC caliber, who's 5 feet tall from the outside. I think that's a very important consideration from the outside. And I value Godinez's boxing and power and technical acumen a lot more than I do Danielle Taylor's. So ultimately, I'm not saying get, too invested in this fight. I personally think actually Godinez is a decent parlay piece. I think the props are a little tricky because I think she could put it on Panay and potentially finish her. I largely see it being a decision though. But I really, really like Lupita Godinez. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about a few of my younger WMMA girls in the past, but I really value this girl's skill set. I like where she's at. She's tough, very well-rounded. I think she has the tools to go out there and beat a girl like Jessica Panay a decent percentage of the time.
I think she's going to be definitely a fighter to look at time and time again, like going forward. I think she's a great women's fighter. I mean, the boxing is incredible. The hands is incredible. The power that she carries in her hands, that's where I'm looking at. This is a knockout fight for her. I think she can definitely put it on Panea because it's been 4 years. The ring rust is going to be there. We've seen it time and time again with guys in the MMA field coming in after a 3, 4, 5 year layoff. Speaking of like Anthony Burchak, I mean, we see this time and time again with the ring rust. So that's what's scary to me is like the Ponzinibbio fight. I mean, we saw him look awful coming into after the ring rust. So the ring rust is real, I think. So I think this is a good fight for Lupita. I think she definitely has the potential to knock her out with the hands that she carries. I think the power's there, the boxing's there, the striking's all the way there. I mean, even the good chin is there. So I'm all in on Lupita, like you were saying. I think she's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the MMA field going forward in the UFC field. So I'm all in on her. I think this is a great fight for her. She's definitely a parlay piece. I'm all in on her. I mean, this is easily a fight for her to take advantage of. So I'm all in. So looking at Gerald Moshrart now versus Babinski, what do you think of this fight, man?
Yeah, this is a what we would call a grappler's delight. It's probably not going to be the most entertaining fight for your traditional casual fan, but if you're a hardcore, you're kind of licking your chops about this one. Fabinski, I believe, is a judo brown belt. He goes to the wrestling with pretty much consistency. He bulls forward, gets guys down, ragdolls them on the ground, wins grinding based decisions. Meerschaert's your more crafty submission grappler. His takedown defense is not good. That's largely because he doesn't put up resistance to a lot of the takedowns that come because he's fine with playing from his back. He's one of those, like I said, crafty guys, kind of longer, willing to attack chokes on entry, arm bars, guard subs, a decent sweep game. So it's one of those fights where it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, because I think Fabinski's going to take him down with absolute ease. But the question becomes, can he avoid the submission game of Meerschaert? We did see Fabinski get subbed in his last outing against Andre Muniz. Cash for a nice little plus 150 there. But Andre Muniz is also a high-level black belt. I'm not saying Gerald Meerschaert isn't, like I said, crafty grappler. The question is he going to be able to create, enough space to force enough of those subs? Because I'm pretty confident in saying that if this fight hits the cards, it's Fabinski all day. It's a pretty difficult fight for Meerschaert to quote unquote win minutes in, but it's also a type of fight that Meerschaert tends to thrive in, on the ground. That's where he loves. And when guys have engaged in that in the past with him, he struggled to some capacity of potentially getting grinding out in certain fights, but then even go look at the Trevin Giles fight. Trevin Giles, pretty terrible fight IQ, dove into his guard, gets guillotined in the third round. So it's like, it's tough, man. I don't have a great read on it. I lean Fabinski decision. And it honestly actually could be a fight that it's probably a good hedge spot where I don't think Fabinski is finishing him. So if you wanted to play both sides and go Fabinski decision and Meerschaert sub, and secure yourself a little profit. Once again, that's not set in stone. It's WMMA or not WMMA. It's MMA. Anything can happen, but I think both of those outcomes are very, very high percentage in and of themselves. So I think it could be actually a decent hedge spot, but I'm leaning Fabinski to grind him out, but not a confident take.
God, this is going to be takedowns after takedowns and grapple after grapple. This is literally going to be all on the ground and just people throwing each other in this fight. This is how it's going to be because both these guys are huge grapplers, like you were saying. Fab, I mean, he's the massive grappler. He's super in your face. In my opinion, he's definitely aggressive. And that's where I think the advantage is because Gerald Meerschaert, he's slow to the pace, I think. That's what's going to be key is if Fabinski can get in his face and take him down, I think, like quick to the mat, that's where the win's going to be. And I think that's where the judges will score him more so than Meerschaert. I mean, we saw Meerschaert against Chimaev. That was obviously a fight that Meerschaert just wasn't going to win. There was absolutely no way he could win it. So I think if Meerschaert does win this fight, but Fab is kind of on the down low now. But in my opinion, this is going to be, like you said, a grappling. I don't think this is going to be striking. I think it's going to be whoever can take the eye down first is going to win this. I think it goes to the judges. I think Fabinski win this fight, though. But it's going to, like you said, it's going to be hard to judge who wins this fight because it's going to be bodies thrown on the ground time and time again. So kind of good luck reading this fight because this is just going to be a good fight to watch to see who can out-grapple who. So in my opinion, if you want to take the plus money on Meerschaert, maybe as a pivot, I don't mind it. But I'm looking at Fabinski basically by decision. So going on to another female fight, though, in Nunes versus Farron, how do you think of this fight, man?
Yeah, this is what I would classify as like a low-level dumpster fire. It doesn't get about much lower level than this. I don't try to be disrespectful, but at the end of the day, I gotta call a spade a spade.
It happens. I mean,
I don't think either of these girls are UFC caliber personally, but yeah, it's a bit of a difficult fight to assess because Farron is. I think a lot of the Farron money that has came in is based on the fact that she got thrown into the UFC. She has to fight Megan Anderson. She has to fight Felicia Spencer, girls who are levels above her, and obviously she got wiped out in a round. She's the much longer girl, much taller girl. So I think that's largely where the narrative and sentiment is coming in here, which I understand to some extent. Nunes, I would kind of classify as a Walmart version of Jessica Andrade. She's a shorter, stocky girl who likes to come forward, chuck hands, is pretty hook reliant. But honestly, I'm actually more so on the side of Nunes here. Not a strong, confident take, but I always have this, I guess, quote unquote, pet peeve of longer strikers in general who just don't utilize those tools well with consistency, or a girl or a guy who can fight going backwards or fight from the outside, utilize a lot of lateral movement, play that sticking move game, utilize their quote unquote tools to maximize their conditions in her fights. Not really. She's Farron's pretty hittable, and I'm kind of confident in saying that I think Nunes is going to be able to get in on the inside here and probably clip her. Conversely, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Farron clips her. It's actually one of those spots where I would not feel good about investing my money in either girl on the money line, but it could be a sneaky spot to target violence here and the fight doesn't go to decision or the under 2.5. Both girls have finishing upside historically, poor defensive tendencies. It's usually those type of spots that I look to target violence in. The problem is I'm not overtly in love with the line there, which is right around evens. I was hoping for, maybe like a plus 150 or something around there, but so yeah, in general, not a ton of betting intrigue on it, but I do think violence is probably the way to go.
Yeah, that's where I'm looking at. Is Nunes is going to go for that knockout potential. The striking, I think, is there for her. That's where her main line of work is going to be. If she can outstrike Farron, that's where the win is going to be at, and that's where that money is going to pay out for you. Is if she can get that one hit knockout and clip her, I think that's where the win is. Farron, she needs a win in order to stay in the UFC. Plain and simple, in my opinion. I think she's needing this win in order to show off how she does have potential because she, like you said, she's fought Megan Anderson. Look who Megan Anderson just fought. I mean, it was the best of the best, obviously. So she's fought good girls. It's just the potential's not there. That's where we need to see, though. So, in my opinion, I think Nunes, this is the way to go. I think if you're on the narrative of Nunes can clip her, then I think that's what the knockout win is going to be. If you're on the narrative of Farron, who has fought the better fighters, she's the better experience, and that she needs a win in order to stay in the UFC, I don't mind that narrative either. So it's kind of just a toss up. Like you said, it's not the really best of fights to look at. So I'm just kind of looking at it and moving on, honestly. So, but going down to Conor Gravely and Anthony Burchak, I like this fight overall. What do you think of this fight, man?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've always been a big, I shouldn't say a big Tony Gravely guy. I actually did bet him against Brett Johns. That did not go so well. But what I will say for Gravely is that he put up a pretty solid fight. He did take a round off of Brett Johns before getting subbed, and Brett Johns is a very, very good fighter. I know he's not in the UFC anymore, but that was more so based on contractual things. He's going to go over to Bellator and do some pretty big things over there. Brett Johns is an elite level fighter, and he gave Brett Johns one hell of a fight. D2 wrestler, I believe, All American out of Appalachian State. Uh, like I said, solid wrestler. I believe either purple belt or brown belt in jiu-jitsu, has a sub game pretty strong from top. Um, Stand up, he's pretty willing to go forward, but he fights with his hands down, is a little hittable, pretty hook reliant. Um, it's a spot that I think in general is decent for Gravely, but at this number, I don't love it because once again, he does fight with his hands down. He's pretty hittable. He has found himself in submission attempts before. He's gotten subbed a couple times, but by pretty solid guys. Like if you want to run through the guys that, Gravy's lost to, I don't have it off the top of my head, but every single guy he's lost to is either now in the UFC or I believe in Bellator, largely have been elite level fighters. But still, the fact that he's put himself in some of these sub attempts makes me a little nervous. Burchak also comes from a wrestling background, 10th planet jiu-jitsu guy, will kind of throw caution to the wind on the feet. But the problem with Burchak, despite only being 34 years old, is that he's a 34-year-old who probably has like 44-year-old MMA miles on him.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who's been around for like a long,
Yeah.
long time. So people might say, oh, he's not that old, but
Physically,
he's in his second stint of the UFC. His stint over in Ryzen didn't look great. Over in Japan, he got out wrestled by a couple guys stuck on his back quite a few times over there. So I largely see it being, Gravely being wrestling or via wrestling domination here, might be able to secure a ground and pound finish. I don't think he chokes out Burchak, to be honest, unless it's like a club and sub type scenario. But in theory, it should be a good spot for Gravely. I guess I would just advise with caution in using him as a parlay piece, and a guy in Burchak who's a bit of a wild man and he's gonna come out and at least kind of, I guess, give it the quote unquote college try. And Gravely and a guy who has some defensive irresponsibilities on the feet and on the ground. So it makes me nervous enough to not use Gravely as a parlay piece, but I am confident in the aggregate he's a guy who will be the superior minute winner, who probably does have more finishing upside. But it's just a little tricky. I'd be more hesitant to put him in a parlay. That's just me personally. I know a lot of people love him as a parlay piece this week. That's fine. probably gets the job done more often than not, but still some defensive things that give me a little pause.
Yeah, I'm all in on Gravely in this fight. I think this is his fight to win. It's just the wrestling to me and the grappling. I mean, I think he overtakes Burchek. It's the fact of the matter is that Burchek is coming off of a loss and that layoff. So both of those factors to me, like you said, the physicality of him, it doesn't look good to me. I know the name value is there. It's Anthony Burchek, obviously. Everybody knows the name, but the thing is, it's the physicality, in my opinion, and the mentality that he carries. I think Gravely's ready to go. I think he's going to step into this fight thinking this is his fight to win. He wants this fight. And I just like the wrestling, like you were saying. I think he's going to come into this fight with the higher upside and that he's the force to be reckoned with. So I like Gravely here a lot. But moving on to the very first fight of the night that I don't have on here is Austin Hubbard versus Dakota Bush. What do you think of that fight, man?
Yeah, I've never been a big Austin Hubbard guy, to be honest. I think I've bet against him like three or four times, to be
Yeah.
honest. And largely the reason is his defensive grappling has been the main issue. But what I will say in regards to Hubbard is, the guys he's losing to are not bad losses in any capacity. Davi Hamosh is an ADC black belt, ADCC black belt world champ. Marco Madsen is an Olympic. Then Joe Selecki, who, we just put on a good performance over Jim Miller a couple of weeks back. Black belt, good wrestler. So he'll take away from the fact that he has poor defensive tendencies on the ground and can be out grappled. So that's what's, excuse me, that's what's kind of interesting about the fight with Bush is the fact that Bush is a grappler. He will wrestle, has a decent back take, decent jiu-jitsu, but definitely not on the level of either of those three guys at all. So it's interesting to see, if he'll be able to implement that against Hubbard. Put it this way, I wouldn't lay, a minus number next on Hubbard at all in this spot. I am predicting him to win because I do think he is the better striker. He is also a guy who self-admittedly now said that he is working with a mental coach for this fight. As a bettor, there's no worse thing for me actually to hear. A lot of people might take that as a positive, saying that, oh, the guy's, looking to develop and, figure out his, psychosis per se. But as a bettor, I look at that as like the big red flag goes up there, because anybody who struggles admittedly with the mental part of the game, there is an exponential amount of variance that comes with betting that fighter, because you don't know how they're going to perform. Or I should say, you have a smaller degree of confidence in what you've seen or how you've capped or your statistical analysis or whatever it may be of how to perform. If the guy says he shows up fight night, not really feeling it tonight, doesn't really work for me. It's like, well, that guy, is a big wild card. And it's those fighters that, man, I do not want any part of. I've been burned on them historically. And it's just probably one of the biggest recommendations I can make for anybody. If you're new to this game or a side point, screw the line. I don't care what the line is. When you're investing in those type of fighters, you're just asking for variance. So it's those spots I'd like to avoid. Once again, I do think Hubbard is the more battle tested. He's probably the better fighter, but Bush hypothetically on paper does have a path to victory in this fight. So I do think it's a dog or pass situation, but it's a fight that I would not invest my money in personally.
Like, speaking of mentality wise, look at Mike Perry. I mean, literally, that's the spitting image of mentality. Like, if you want to fight that night, you're going to fight. If you don't want to, you're not going to. Literally. I mean, that's just the spitting image of the mental game in the UFC. I can't say it more than that, obviously. So it's just, who do you think is going to show up with Austin Hubbard? Do you think the guy that has the good knockout potential and the good looks and the tough losses that he's had, or is he going to come into this fight just not wanting to fight? That's the thing. And Dakota Bush, I mean, there's a lot of talks about him all over Twitter from what I've seen. Is he's just a fiery dude who's coming into the UFC from LFA with killer potential. Like, he's just going to go in with that huge knockout potential. So if you think he clips Austin Hubbard at plus money, I don't mind taking a shot at Bush, honestly. And that's what I'm looking at. Is I think this is a decent first fight. I want to see Hubbard I want to see Hubbard improve because, like you said, the mentality game. I want to see that look and see how he does step up. But I want to see how Bush looks also coming into this UFC from LFA. So I think there's going to be a lot of talks around this fight, and I think it's a decent first fight. But overall, man, what do you think of this card before we head out of here?
Yeah, I think in general it's a fun card. Not an overt amount of name value. We got Arlovsky, Stevens, Whittaker, probably more of a hardcore, I guess I would say, base card, but
Yeah,
a lot of really fun matchups, a lot of fun fights. Yeah, I like it. I'm gonna say that probably about most cards because I tend to pick out some nuggets that probably
right.
your average person wouldn't. Like I said, the Fabinski Mearshart, a lot of people would say I want nothing to do with that. For me, I'm like, yes, I'm all for it. I
Hangdown
want to
City.
100% see how that's gonna
Hangdown City.
happen. So
Yeah.
so I think it's a sneaky fun card.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about this card. It was fun talking to you, man, about this card. It was really exciting going from a betting perspective and just getting another person's opinion. So it was definitely fun talking to you, man. Go ahead and tell everybody your Twitter and stuff like that before we out of here.
For sure. Yep. You guys can follow me on Twitter at SWR_betting. Probably my most active social media platform. I am on Instagram. Haven't posted on there in a second. Probably
Oh
need
God.
to get back on the horn in that regard. But other plug, once again, Club and Sub podcast Wednesday nights at 9 Central on YouTube. Myself and a roundtable of other gamblers. The podcast was up over 100 units back in 2020. Still killing it this year. Probably one of the best podcasts out there that you can listen to for free advice as well. I'm also on Patreon, where if you want to get my entire opinions about all the fights, breakdowns, I do a full card breakdowns, content pieces, prop article, parlay article every week. I offer 3 tiers on there. We're up 35 units this year through 3 months.
Hell yeah.
Subscribers have pretty much paid off their entire year's worth of already being subscribed to me. So not only do you get quality bets and a transparent guy who's going to talk back with you and help you out, you're getting a ton of content along with that. So that's patreon.com/SWR betting. Check me out on there. Would love to have you. Looking to expand some of the tiers and expand the offering, doing the live stream exclusively with my patrons on Friday tomorrow to recap some of the weigh-ins, final thoughts. So it should be fun. But yeah, those are my plugs.
Exactly. But yeah, so it was, like I said, fun talking to you. Definitely everybody stay tuned for the weigh-ins. That definitely changes up a lot of things because we need to see fights that might not happen because obviously this is the COVID era. So fights come and fights come off. So just definitely stay tuned for that. I'll be on Twitter, always talking about the fights. I know you will be also. So I'll definitely drop your links in the description below on the YouTube channel. It was fun talking to you, man. Hope everybody has a good and safe rest of their night. Thank you all for tuning in.